Thank you, Chairman Corker, Ranking Member Cardin, for this important hearing. And thank you, Secretary Mattis and Secretary Tillerson, for the service you've rendered to our country and for the men and women you lead in command. I think it's important that we as a committee come together in a bipartisan way and provide you with an updated authorization for the very demanding and difficult work that your men and women are doing around the world. I think the tragedy in Niger, the loss of 4 American soldiers, helped focus us on the fact that we've got citizens and we've got senators who are unclear on exactly where in the world we are engaged against this morphing, changing enemy in a new era of skirmishes, as you put it, sir. And in the opening list you gave of roughly, I think, 19 countries, I'll tell you it's striking. A majority of them are on the continent of Africa, in a region that is not that familiar to many senators and many Americans. So I'll just assert that I believe it to be in our national interest to have a renewed, clearer, strengthened authorization of the very difficult work that you and the folks you lead are doing around the world. And I take seriously the risk presented of potentially emboldening our adversaries and undermining confidence of our coalition partners if we do it in a way that is rough-hewn. But at the same time, it just defies my sense of our role to accept that a 2001 AUMF, where, as Senator Flake put it, fewer than a third of the currently serving Congress voted for it, has become so attenuated, I think was your phrase, so convoluted that it's hard to trace a path from 2001 and al-Qaeda in Afghanistan to young American men and women serving in the Philippines or in Yemen or in Niger. So we have to do this, I think, together. And I find it beyond my ability to get my head around that we must authorize an unlimited war that has no limits of geography, of time, or of an oversight mechanism. So I commend my colleagues who've put together what I think are strong drafts and that attempt to tackle this. And I frankly think on both sides we're going to have to make concessions in order to provide our warfighters and our diplomats with the authorization that makes it clear what we intend to do and for how long we intend to do it. I think that strengthens our country. I think that shows democracy at work, but it also means we're going to have to take some risks. Talk to me, if you would, for a moment about how we make sure that our citizens, that our senators, know where we are fighting beyond the current system of notification, because I think it is not fully effective. And what do you think is the appropriate level of public transparency for military deployments outside of areas of active hostility? Is it helpful? Is it important? And how do we strengthen accountability to the Senate and the public of where we're deployed, and what are the limits on that?
Senator, I would just say that in my department's case in FY16, we submitted 901 reports to the Senate, which for the number of days you're in session is about 6 a day. It has been added in FY17, another 175, so we'll be submitting 7 reports a day. Under the War Powers Resolution notification that comes in, Niger has been reported every 6 months under the previous administration, as well as under our current administration. The most recent in June reported about 645, thanks to the appropriations by the Congress to work on an airfield. We have actually got probably 150 more there right now, engineers working on an airfield with the money you provided to make the airfield that will provide more ISR opportunity for our troops in that region. So I think the most important thing is we look at the reports we're giving you to see if we're just burying the important information inside a mass of reports that pour into you every day, literally, and make sure that maybe tier 1 issues that, and this would be, you would decide tier 1, that we're highlighting that information to you to include in any closed hearing briefings that filled in any gaps you sensed.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Secretary Tillerson.
Well, Senator, I think what you really put your finger on is what is, I think, concerning, I'm hearing concerning this committee and others, and that is the level of transparency and understanding of where our forces are deployed and in what role they're deployed and to what levels they're deployed, and what's the expectation for the likelihood of combat engagement. But I also think that when I consider the current AUMF, and I don't want to pretend to know what the intent of Congress was in 2001, but quite frankly, maybe the intent recognized that this was a completely different situation than we've ever faced before. This was not a sovereign state actor that we could do a war declaration against. And war declarations, I think as Senator Johnson pointed out, don't have timelines. We didn't tell the Japanese we're going to come out and fight for 3.5 years and then we're going home. And we've done that. We've done that under this AUMF. We've announced withdrawal from Iraq, and we see what happened. ISIL emerged and created an enormous caliphate. So anything that signals our intentions, this enemy takes advantage of that. We have now learned that lesson multiple times. So I do appreciate that the issue over what congressional control or oversight there is for this authorization. On the other hand, Article 1 gave the Congress the right to declare war. Article 2 gave the Commander-in-Chief the right to conduct the military affairs. And I think the founders recognized in writing Article 1 and Article 2 that you can't fight war by consensus. You can't fight war with a collective approach. There has to be one Commander-in-Chief to fight the war because someone has to take the hard decisions to win. And so the separation is there, I think, in Articles 1 and Article 2. And the reason there is not a declaration of war here is because, as I indicated earlier, the situation, the circumstances don't give rise to a declaration of war, which then puts into motion a number of other authorizations. So I think the authority's been properly used by the Congress in the 2001 AUMF. As Secretary Mattis, I think, would welcome a strong statement from the Congress, but in many respects, the Congress can express its will now, 16 years later, and say this authorization is still valid. And it's serving the purposes of this war against this very unique and unusual enemy that we will fight for we don't know how long, or for where, or with what forces. That is the nature of this fight that we're in.
Well, Mr. Secretary, I'd like to thank both of you. I'll just comment in closing. Having spent time in West Africa, I am particularly concerned about the ways in which associated forces morph and change, affiliate and disassociate, and the way in which who we are fighting metastasizes, more at their choice and direction and timing than ours, and how it's possible for something like Boko Haram to split into two and to become now two enemies, one Al-Qaeda affiliated, one ISIS affiliated, but without a significant amount of direction or funding or control from a core enemy. This is a different kind of fight than we've been in as a nation before. And I do think our constituents expect some sense of strategy, trajectory, timeline, and cost. Yet I am not blind to what you raise as the very real risks if we undermine the confidence of our coalition partners and our troops by failing to deliver a strong consensus AUMF. I look forward to working on that with you both, and I thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Rankin.